Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is about to release and you're a faith wielder, right? Of course you are. You wouldn't be watching this video if you weren't. Considering we're entering into a realm opposite of the lands in between, place teeming with enemies and bosses resistant to holy attacks, it makes a lot of sense to build into faith. Plus, fire is pretty insane. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a list of the top 10 incantations and their locations so that once the Elden Ring DLC comes out, you're prepared to dominate. These spells are objectively the best for faith casters and should perform pretty well regardless of what the Erdtree throws at you. With that in mind, let's dive into the first incantation. So the first incantation we're going to be covering is called Catch Flame. This is a fairly low level incantation. Hell, if you start as the Prophet class, you actually get this skill. Catch Flame is a monk type skill that requires a low 10 FP cost that is a highly spammable incantation and does some pretty absurd damage considering the FP cost. You can absolutely clear every bit of Elden Ring with this spell, and based on what we've seen thus far with the Shadow of the Erdtree reveal, I get the feeling this spell is going to be absolutely smoking every bit of it. The major negative obviously comes from the lack of range of this spell, and while this is a pretty massive downside, the reality is it is a fairly strong spell that has insanely low requirements, and if you're a faith user, you should be using it. Again, you can get this as the starting Prophet class. I know a lot of people are doing a new playthrough, so you should have it already if you're going with a faith build. If you haven't started as the Prophet though, you can find Catch Flame at Brother Gurranq at the Round Table Hold for 600 runes. A very accessible spell that you can get super easily and super early. For the next incantation, we're going to be going with Lightning Spear. Now this is actually one of the better incantations that I use quite a bit because it's just straight up reliable. It has a reasonable cast animation and can be super fast or charged to deal some super nice damage. The projectile is straightforward and typically hits the target with some pretty solid damage, and if there is any water or rain, the skill gets a damage buff. It's a pretty all-around skill you should have as a part of your arsenal. It clocks in with a small 17 faith requirement and a reasonable 18 FP cost, and it's a solid go-to. You can get the Lightning Spear from, again, Brother Gurranq or Miro, the Pastor of Vows, the huge turtle guy, but you need to give them the Dragon Cult prayer book. Next we have Frenzied Burst. Now I know not everyone is a massive fan of madness skills since they seem to be very built for PvP most of the time, but Frenzied Burst is actually pretty god tier. Of course you can use it for PvP, but for a single target DPS from a distant skill, this skill does some pretty insane damage. The FP cost is a bit on the meteor side with a 24 FP cost, but even with it, considering the minimal madness buildup and the range damage, is a must pick up for the casual sniping. We don't know what the Erdtree is going to throw at us, and having a really long range option like this is actually going to be really valuable. Frenzied Burst can be obtained from the Teardrop Scarab in the Learning of the Lakes area. This is south of the Church of Inhibition near the Fraternized Rats. Shouldn't be too hard to get, but I'm assuming most players actually have this. Next we have something of a different taste when it comes to spells, not necessarily fire or lightning, but a little bit of physical with the Stone of Gurranq. This one is a little bit of a pain to get in all fairness because it does require you to get 6 death root to Gurranq, of course, but once you have this low faith requirement incantation of 13 faith and a reasonable 15 FP cost incantation, you have a pretty insane stance damaging skill that is pretty damn amazing at being a strong range option. It's one of the few physical incantation that you probably will ever see on any list regarding being best at anything, but the poise break is kind of second to none considering the range and the cost. The major drawback though will be the lack of tracking. I'm pretty sure it's non-existent, so you will have to be smart on how you use it, possibly avoid using it on those faster mobs, but once again the stance break is a little bit too good to ignore, so definitely a must pick up. Now I don't really like dedicating too many things to buffs as it will come off as a bit more boring. Most players want to deal damage and I 100% get that. With that said, Blessing Boons is too good not to mention, especially since we're going to be exploring a brand new zone and it's actually really great for that. What Blessing Boon does is it gives you and nearby allies a pretty amazing buff that lasts for a grand total of 90 seconds. It restores a total of 720 HP for a mere 24 FP cost. Of course, this is delayed. It does require 90 seconds to get the full amount of it, but we are going to be adventuring around and that amount of HP while casually riding around is going to be extremely valuable. This is my go-to buff when it comes to just sustaining, and you definitely should possibly consider picking it up. You can once again find this incantation at Miro, Pastor of the Vows for a small cost of 4,000 runes, and honestly it's one of the best incantations in the entire game in my opinion. Alright, we're about halfway through this list of amazing incantations. If you liked the video so far, consider leaving me a like or subscribing to the channel for more Elden Ring content, and let's continue. Next, on to arguably one of the most amazing amazing looking skills in the entire game, we have Black Blade. Now while this skill has a whopping 46 faith cost and requires you to kill one of the hardest bosses in the entire game, Malakath, the skill itself does quite a bit. Contrary to its visual appearance, it actually does 100% holy damage, which again, considering we're in a realm that is considered to be the opposite of the realm in between, I think is worth possibly having on your bar. Even more so, it reduces enemies HP by 10% for 15 seconds, so no matter what, you get some value out of it. Plus, once again, it looks amazing. Speaking of debuffs, this list would be borderline trolling if I didn't include one of the best, if not the best, debuffing skills in the entire game, Greyoll's Roar. This is one of the few hybrid spells on this list requiring 17 arcane to pull off and a 28 faith cost, but considering it weakens enemies by debuffing their damage by 15% and reducing their defense, making them take more damage for a whopping 60 seconds, I think it's absolutely mandatory to take this spells if you're a faith build. On top of the pretty absurd debuff, it knocks enemies back and have a sizable AoE, meaning you're probably going to hit quite a few enemies when you cast this. To get this spell, it does require you to kill Elder Dragon Greyoll and give the Dragon Communion Altar in Caelid 3 Dragon Hearts. But again, the skill is kind of busted, so yeah, go do that. Swapping back to another frenzy based skill because I absolutely love them, we have Unendurable Frenzy. This skill hits like a truck. I am a massive fan of any skill that has this level of flash and functionality, which is not that common in Elden Ring if I'm being honest. It functions to be an insanely powerful face spell that shreds anything big or small. The madness build up on this is reasonable, and despite being an FP draining machine, this incantation damage is so damn high that it 100% makes up for it. This incantation can be found in the yellow annex ruins inside a chest. This is closer to the in-game area of the game, but if you're Shadow of the Erdtree ready, then you probably have already unlocked this area and should be able to go get it fairly easy. Continuing my obsessive theme with fire-based skills, it's time to talk about a more simple skill to use, Black Flame. Now I am personally a massive fan of Black Flame skills, mainly because they're fire-based and they look so damn awesome. But adding in the addition of shredding percent HP when enemies are hit is just lovely. Black Flame has an amazing cast animation, the instant damage is pretty good, and the 18 FP cost and the fact that it takes percent HP, I think the skill is a must-have. In order to get this one, you simply need to give Brother Gurranq or Miro Pastor of the Vows the Godskin prayer book, and you get access to the skill. The prayer book can be found in the Stormveil Castle near the left side Chamber of Grace and does require a stone sword key, but once again, once you get the incantation, it's well worth it. Finally, last but not least, we have Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, another incantation that can be purchased from Brother Gurranq or Miro Pastor of the Vows and only require you to get the Ancient Dragon Prayer Book. This spell is pretty insane. It does have a fairly long cast animation, but once you learn how to use it and position yourself well, you can get some pretty insane damage from it. Typically, I like to use this against the kind of big opponents to maximize the strikes. Obviously, the bigger guys are going to be much easier to hit with this, but ultimately going into the new DLC and looking at the enemies we've seen so far, it's not unreasonable to have a spell like this that can take down kind of large to large enemies in no time. The FP cost is 36, so quite a bit, but at this point in the game, when you actually get it, you should be more than good at sustaining the cost, and of course this spell looks dope, so an incantation I highly recommend. There you have it. That is 10 amazing incantations that I think anyone who's playing a faith build should consider bringing into the new DLC when it finally drops on the 20th. I have no doubt that most, if not all of these, will have some pretty insane uses, as incantations are generally designed that way, but with these you're definitely going to be setting yourself up pretty well to smash out the Shadow of the Erdtree. Anyways, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to follow all the socials down in the description, and just like that guys, I'll see you in the next video very soon.